following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. This is Comfortably Zoned Radio, and it's time for Dodgers baseball. A tale of two cities, from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. My name is Peter Trunk, and my co-host is Robert Cole. Ronnie Rabinovitz, my other co-host, is on assignment tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about the passing of Ransom Jackson, who played a little third base for the 56 and 57 Dodgers. And before we begin, I want to play a little clip of Vin Scully announcing a Saturday afternoon game, the Giants and the Dodgers at Ebbets Field. My father and I were there. He took me as an 11th birthday present. My birthday had been 3 days before this game. And let's give it a listen and see what Vin Scully sounds like.
Both the Giants and the Dodgers were talking about Don Drysdale's brilliant performance last night. That's all the Giants were talking about in their dressing room after the game, shaking their heads and saying he's quite a kid. Magley decides to back off the rubber now, just staring in. 1 ball, 1 strike to Ray Jablonski. Magley looks to his runners and delivers 1-1, and a sharp curve down and miss. 1-2. Nothing to report at all in the American League. All their games are at night. There are 2 afternoon games in the National League besides this one. 1-2 pitch. Fastball in there. Call strike 3. Ray Jablonski had to be guessing that time. Magley came right down the middle with the fastball. 2 out. Here's Hank Sauer. Hank batting .260, 22 home, 64 runs batted in. In the games to be played this afternoon, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Friend and Cardwell. The Cardinals and the Cubs, Wiemeyer against either Drott or Elston. These are probable. And Milwaukee at Cincinnati tonight. So we'll have a pretty quiet scoreboard today. Sauer waiting. Magley going to let him hang up there. Now Magley ready and delivers. Curveball, low and inside. Ball 1. 1-0. Not only do we have the 6,000 not all young ladies stay here, and we have quite a representation. I don't think we're going to have our over 4,000 ladies that we had a week ago. Nice to have the gals out here with us. Magley delivers 1-0 to Sauer, and the serve is over. 1-1. Don Mueller nubbed one up along third for a base hit. Mays single to left. Jablonski is struck out. So with 2 down, the count to Hank Sauer. 1 ball, 1 strike. Magley ready, the 1-1ers. Sharp curve, and there's a fly ball into shallow left. Samoli trotting in. Under it now and takes it for the out, and that does it. Well, the Giants in the first inning, no runs, 2 hits. They leave 2 men. At the end of half an inning, the Giants nothing, and the Dodgers coming up. Jim Gilliam batting .253 with a home run and 31 runs batted in. Gilliam, Samoli, and Snyder in the bottom of the first inning, no score. Al Worthington ready to go with a record of 8 wins and 9 defeats. He is 1-0 against Brooklyn and lifetime 4-1. Big right-hander. Delivers and wrinkles the first one in for a strike. 1-1. His slider and break.
That's a little taste. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry about the tape. It's a little old, but anyway, so are we. That was August the 31st, 1957, at Ebbets Field. There were 14,222 people there. I always like to think that the last two were me and my pop. So it would have been 14,220 if we hadn't attended. But anyway, in that game, the Dodgers won it 7-5. Believe it or not, Magley started for the Dodgers when 5 2/3 gave up 2 earned runs. Koufax relieved, gave up a hit, didn't retire anyone, and then Roebuck came in and finished it up. Not only did Roebuck win the game, Roebuck hit a home run. Ed Roebuck hit a home run. Gil Hodges also homered for the Dodgers, and Jabo Ray Jablonski homered for the Giants. Final score was 7-5 Dodgers. Anyway, this is the show we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about the 56 and 57 Dodgers. My co-host Robert Cole has a list of remaining living Brooklyn Dodgers. Ransom Jackson passed away early this morning. We had a chance to interview him a year and a half ago on this radio network, and you can find that on YouTube by searching Comfortably Zone Radio, Ransom Jackson. Robert, you want to tell us about the list of living Dodgers?
Sure. Okay, there's 16 now. I've got them in alphabetical order.
Okay.
Okay, Bob Aspromonte. Now, Bob Aspromonte was signed in 1956 by the Dodgers, and they had a habit back in those days of, one of the things they promised the player when they signed him is that they would bring him up at the end of the season and let him sit on the bench. And in this case, Bob Aspromonte got in one game late in the 56 season against Dick Littlefield, and that was his only major league at bat with the Brooklyn Dodgers. He, of course, later came up with the Los Angeles Dodgers and played quite a few years in Houston. Then we have a very interesting player, Eddie Basinski. Now, Eddie Basinski is currently the oldest living Brooklyn Dodger. He was born November 4th, 1922. In a lot of the newspaper clippings today and on the computer about Randy Jackson, they said he was the oldest living Dodger, and that's not true. There are a couple of others that are still alive that are older. But Eddie Basinski was known more from being a violin player than he was a baseball player, and in fact played the violin at Carnegie Hall one time in a concert. He spent most of his time in the Pacific Coast League, 10 years with the Portland Beavers, but he did play shortstop for the Brooklyn Dodgers during the years that Pee Wee Reese was in the service.
Let me ask you a question right there, right in the middle of that.
Yes.
Didn't ball players make comparable money in the Pacific Coast League, if not more, than they made in the major leagues? And they weren't too sad when they were either dealt or signed with a Pacific Coast League team back in those days.
That's correct. The Pacific Coast League was very, very close in salary and in many cases in talent to the major leagues. And, I mean, just quickly, that's one of the reasons why Walter O'Malley went to Los Angeles when he did, because the Pacific Coast League was trying extremely hard to become a third major league. And O'Malley saw that that was going to happen sooner than later, and he made his move at that time.
Right.
Chuck Connors, okay, former Brooklyn Dodger Chuck Connors, okay, he was traded to the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs sent him to Los Angeles in the Pacific Coast League. They had a chance to sell him to another major league team, and he said, no, please do not do that. I want to stay in Los Angeles. And, of course, the reason why was he was getting into television and the movies, and he, of course, became famous on television as the Rifleman. So, yes,
right.
The Pacific Coast League was quite a good baseball league.
It was a good baseball league, and you mentioned that Eddie Basinski played for the Portland Beavers. I happen to have in my collection 2 jerseys, one home and one away, of the Portland Beavers in, of course, not the latest polyester garbage, but actual wool jerseys with the zipper. And both jerseys say Beavers on the front, and there's a baseball bat with two beavers on it, not unlike the Cardinals' signature uniform with the baseball bat and the two Cardinals on it. I have both of them, the gray one and the white one, both with zippered fronts. But Eddie Basinski, that's a great name from the past in Brooklyn.
Yep. Then we move on to Tommy Brown. Now, Tommy Brown, also interesting, he was signed at the age of 16 during the war years. Tommy Brown played for the Dodgers during the war years, and the Dodgers in those days, what they would do when a player hit a home run, they would slide Old Gold cigarettes down the screen to the player. Well, Tommy Brown was too young to smoke, so he wasn't allowed to get the cigarettes those couple of times that he hit home runs. His claim to fame for the Dodgers was he was a prolific batting practice home run hitter.
I was going to say that.
Yep, and he used to count his home runs that he hit in batting practice. He also had a scatter arm, and he didn't know, and no one else knew exactly where the ball was going to be thrown when he threw it. But
that's true.
Brown,
and
yep.
you know, Tommy Brown not only counted his batting practice home runs, which were numerous, but when I spoke with Ralph Branca, he had nothing good to say about Tommy Brown. He disliked Tommy Brown with a vengeance, did Ralph Branca. Cost him a couple of games with his scatter arm, as you were mentioning, and Branca was not a fan of Tommy Brown.
But he lived the dream that we all dreamed about, and that's playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was there at the age of 16. Then we go to someone we all know, Roger Craig. Okay, Roger Craig, of course, we know for winning Game 5 of the 1955 World Series as a rookie. The interesting thing about Roger Craig was both he and Don Besson were brought up in 1955 on the same day, and they each pitched a game of a doubleheader on a Saturday. I remember it fairly clearly. Craig won the first game, and Don Besson won the second game. Craig, of course, became famous with the New York Mets, very long losing streak, but he was about as good a pitcher as the Mets had those first couple of years. Later went to the Cardinals, also became famous as a pitching coach and as the manager of the Giants. And his claim to fame pitching-wise was he was very big with the split-fingered fastball, and he started teaching that to a lot of his pitchers, and a lot of pitchers became good overnight by throwing that pitch.
Scott, remember Scott?
Yep.
Used to be a Met, and then he went to Mike Scott. Then he went to Houston. He was average with the Mets. Went to Houston and became Cy Young. He perfected that split finger pitch and was untouchable. I think he pitched a no-hitter.
That I'm not sure of. He may have, but I know in 1986, okay, he in the playoffs he was pitching for Houston. He won 2 of the games against the Mets, and he was scheduled to pitch Game 7 if there was a Game 7. And the Mets desperately wanted to win in 6, which they did, because they did not want to face him in Game 7.
Exactly. Yeah. True.
Okay, and then we move on to another familiar player, not so much with the Dodgers, and that's Don Demeter. Don Demeter was supposed to be the heir apparent to Duke Snider in center field, and may have been had the Dodgers stayed in Ebbets Field. However, he moved around quite a bit, did play in Brooklyn a few games, played in Los Angeles a few games, played with the Phillies, played with the Tigers, among other teams. Was a journeyman ball player, could play third base in the outfield, a decent ball player, but nothing, not a Hall of Famer by a long shot.
No.
Then we go to our favorite living Brooklyn Dodger right now, and that's Carl Erskine.
Yeah.
Okay, and we talk about Carl a lot. I think Peter has interviewed Carl, spoken to him. I have an autograph up from Carl Erskine that another friend of mine who lives in Indiana got me. Great guy, still very active. Of course, pitched 2 no-hitters while he was with the Brooklyn Dodgers. The second of one in 1956 against the Giants. After the Giants went public in the newspaper and said Erskine had nothing left, Erskine went out the next day and pitched a no-hitter against them. And I remember Jackie Robinson running over to the Giant dugout with a newspaper in his pocket, and he pulled it out, and it was the newspaper. Tom Sheehan, one of the Giants scouts at that time, had said the day before in the paper that Carl Erskine was through, that he had nothing left. And Robinson just waved that paper in Tom Sheehan's face. I have a feeling Peter remembers that no-hitter as I do.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Then we go to Jim Gentile. Now, Jim Gentile, in 1961, I believe, or 62, led the American League in RBIs. He was another in the long line of heir apparents to Gil Hodges at first base. Another player that had the Dodgers stayed in Ebbets Field probably would have become a very well-known Brooklyn Dodger. He was a left-handed pull hitter, power hitter, who probably would have loved hitting over that screen like Duke Snider did. Of course, when they moved to Los Angeles, like Duke Snider, he lost his power with the vast spaces of right field, and he eventually got traded to the Baltimore Orioles. But one of the things that Jim Gentile is known for is he hit 2 Grand Slam home runs in the same inning. And that, of course, is still the record. Then we have a player that I'm really not familiar with, and it's Chris Hoey, Haugghey. He was born October 3rd, 1925. Okay. He debuted in 1943 on October 3rd, and his final game was October 3rd, 1943. Okay. Another one of those teenagers the Dodgers had brought up during the war years, pitched in 1 game, and that was it. So he was
one of our Facebook friends, and it's in my head right now. It's either Jim Denny or Mark Gent, one of the two, has gone to visit Hoey and has pictures. Yes, and has pictures taken with him, and interviewed him, and had a ball signed by him, and had stories told to him by Hoey. And I, like you, before I heard of that meeting and interview, I had no recollection of this man.
Right.
But it's a fact. One of our Facebook friends knows him, speaks with him, writes to him, etc.
Okay. And then we go to Fred Kipp. Okay, Fred Kipp, late 1956, I believe it was. He pitched a little bit. Went to the Dodgers, into Los Angeles as well. Didn't pitch very many games, but another one of those guys that was expected to be a big winner in Brooklyn, and the move to Los Angeles kind of shuttled him back. Then we go to our most famous Brooklyn Dodger alum, and that's Sandy Koufax. And I mean, we really don't need to talk about Sandy. Everything's been said about Sandy that you can. Other than, in 1955, 56, and 57, none of us thought that Sandy Koufax was going to become Sandy Koufax.
No, we did not. And I saw him pitch.
Tremendous left arm.
I saw him pitch as a Brooklyn Dodger, and I saw him pitch as a Los Angeles Dodger. And I have to admit that when I saw him pitch as a Los Angeles Dodger, he was in a totally different pitcher. He was top shelf. One of the greatest. I saw him pitch 4 or 5 times at both the Polo Grounds and Shea Stadium. Excellent pitcher. Excellent. Probably the best I ever saw.
Yes, for that period of time, what was it, 5 or 6 years, none better. And, of course, he always gave credit to Norm Sherry, who was the catcher in the Dodger organization at that time, for telling him during spring training, Sandy, you got so much stuff on your baseball, you don't have to throw the ball 110 miles an hour. You take a little bit off of that, and you're still plenty fast. And he finally started doing that and became the Sandy Koufax that we knew. Yeah,
he told him that on a bus trip on their way to an exhibition game, a road game in Florida. And Sandy took it to heart, thank God, and became an elite Major League Hall of Fame left-handed pitcher.
Yep. Then we go to Tommy Lasorda. Now, Tommy, of course, is known for bleeding Dodger blue out in Los Angeles. Never did much with the Brooklyn Dodgers, was always a big winner in the minor leagues for the Brooklyn Dodgers. His self-professed claim to fame was that in 1955, he was the Dodger that was cut to make room for Sandy Koufax. And Tommy played 1 full year in the major leagues. That was in 1957. He was traded to the Kansas City Athletics, didn't fare all that well. And, of course, his claim to fame is being the Los Angeles Dodgers manager for many years.
Yeah, he never won a game in the major leagues. He's a big self-promoter. Some people say a bullshitter. I have mixed emotions, Tommy Lasorda. I love the guy and / can't stand the guy in many different areas. So I'm like broken up about Tommy Lasorda, but he is a Dodger, and he did bleed Dodger blue his whole life, and he always said, Dodgers this and Dodgers that, and when I'm buried, the Dodgers should put their schedule on my tombstone, blah, blah, blah. But not many people know this. He was a red cunt hair away from signing a contract with the Yankees and the boss, Steinbrenner. Steinbrenner had him down sitting at a table ready to sign a contract to manage the Yankees. And whatever happened at the 11th hour, it didn't go through, but Tommy was going to be bleeding Yankee dark blue if he had signed that contract.
Yep.
But anyway, that's that.
Then we go to Glenn Mickens, another, not well-recognizable name. Glenn Mickens pitched in 4 games for the 1953 Brooklyn Dodgers, who won 105 games that year on their way to the pennant. Good minor league pitcher. He came out of UCLA where he played from 49 to 53, then went to the Dodgers for those couple of games. He pitched for the Montreal Royals from 53 to 56 at a time when he was a teammate of Tommy Lasorda, who was also there. And he was one of the first former major league players to go to Japan. He played there in 1959 and played there for 5 seasons. And that's Mr. Mickens. Then we move on to, catch my place here again. Excuse me for a second. Bobby Morgan. Okay.
Alrighty.
Bobby Morgan was the most valuable player in the International League in 1949. He was expected to become the next Dodger third baseman. Came up in 1950. Billy Cox was having some injuries, and they brought Bobby Morgan up. Bobby Morgan actually started the year of 1950 at third base, and was replaced by Billy Cox, who we know about. And Bobby Morgan became a journeyman ball player, played with many teams, including the Cubs and the Phillies. He played all over the infield, all over the outfield. long major league career, but again, nowhere near being a great ball player.
Bobby Morgan was perhaps the most photographed Brooklyn Dodger who never made it.
Yeah.
There's like 50,000 photographs of Bobby Morgan as a Brooklyn Dodger in spring training. And like you said, he made his oats elsewhere. Cubs, I remember the Cubs and other places, but not Brooklyn.
No.
That's Bobby Morgan.
Then we go to Joe Pignatano. Joe, Brooklyn-born, was brought up in 1957 as the third catcher. Major league teams carried three catchers. Most of them did during that period of time. He was brought up to basically sit on the bench and catch the bullpen as the third catcher. And then when Roy Campanella and Rube Walker both had injuries, they sent him down and brought up Johnny Roseboro to actually be the fill-in catcher.
Yes.
Joe played in a couple of games. In fact, in a game that you can get on YouTube, was a Sandy Koufax pitched game against the Cubs. Joe Pignatano made his first appearance as a player, getting a base hit in his first at bat, and that was basically his high point.
In that game, if I may, Robert,
yep.
In that game, our friend Vin Scully said on the air, if anyone knows the Pignatano family, get in touch with them right away because Joe is playing in the game.
Yep.
He actually said that on the air, told Brooklyn fans to get in touch with the Pignatano family and tune the game in because Joe was seeing some action.
And that just gives you an idea of the way things were in Brooklyn. I mean, it was just a neighborhood, you know.
Exactly.
Brooklyn Dodgers were a neighborhood team. And, everybody, kind of knew everybody. I mean, a lot of people in this day and age don't understand that. But those that lived in Brooklyn will understand what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay. Then our last two players, we go to someone who Peter spoke to and has spoken about, and that's Wayne Terwilliger. And I'll let Peter talk about Wayne.
Wayne Terwilliger. Let me tell you something. When I was a little kid, we used to, of course, we all, and I know you did, Robert, we all collected baseball cards. And
absolutely.
It always, I would open up my baseball cards, and there would be a Wayne Terwilliger in there almost every time I opened up a pack. And Twig was quite a character. I mean, he did play for the 1951 Brooklyn Dodgers that lost the pennant to the shot heard around the world. I went to and I know I've mentioned this more than once on the broadcast, and I promise I won't mention it again until next week. I went to a Dodger weekend in North New Jersey in 2007. On Saturday, they were having the Brooklyn Dodgers, and on Sunday they were having the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was called a Dodger weekend, and I went both days. And when I showed up on Saturday, I showed up with a camera around my neck. This was before cell phones. And I had a Dodger uniform on. I forget what shirt it was. It might have been Jackie Robinson. It might have been Duke Snyder. I can't remember. It was 4 or 42. But anyway, I walk in with a Brooklyn hat and a Dodger jersey on, and this little guy comes up to me, little wiry guy comes up to me, and he says, "Are you the photographer for the event?" And I said, No, I'm not. I'm just a fan. My name is Peter Trunk. I live in East Brunswick, New Jersey. I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Wayne Terwilliger." I said, "You're Wayne Terwilliger?" I said, "Twig." I said, "How you doing? Great to meet you." And we talked for the better part of the whole day. We hung out together. Even when I was talking to people like Ralph Branca and others, Don Newcomb, a whole bunch of Dodgers, I was no more than 2 or 3 steps away from Wayne Terwilliger. He was right by my side. We talked the entire day, and he told me many, many interesting stories. One of the most outrageous stories that he told me, and I have no reason to disbelieve him, was that when he was a third base coach for the Washington Senators, the official manager of the team was Ted Williams. He said, but I was the manager. I said, what do you mean? He said, I called everything. I called the pitching changes, the stolen bases, the hit and run, the bunt, the take, the hit. I did everything. All Ted did was teach hitting, would teach hitting in the clubhouse. He would get a bat and stand in the middle of the room and tell everybody how to hit. He said, I was the real manager of that team. I said, holy cow. And at the time, this was 2007, I'm not sure if you have Wayne Terwilliger's birth date there in front of you.
Yeah, I can look it up real quick. 1926, I believe.
1926. So he was, 81 when I met him?
Yep.
And now he's 90-something. In his late 80s, he continued, Wayne Terwilliger, he continued to be the third base coach for the Fort Worth Cats. He still was active. I think he was 88 years old or something. He was still third base coach for Fort Worth. And what a guy. What a crazy day that was. I'll never forget it because driving home, that was the day Linda had to work. I went alone. Linda was going to come with me the next day on Sunday, which she did for the Los Angeles iteration of the show. And driving home, I'm saying to myself, how can Wayne Terwilliger play Major League Baseball? I could lift him off the ground with one hand. The guy was a waif. He looked to me to be about 5'7", 5'8", and 125 pounds. You look up his numbers and it says he was 5'11" or 6 feet. That's not true. That's totally not true. I spent the entire day with the guy. A strong sneeze would have blown him down on his butt on the floor. When I came home, I saw that he had hit Major League home runs. This guy hit home runs in the Major Leagues. It's just absolutely amazing. Both of my daughters are bigger than him. My wife, Linda, is bigger than him. Most of the women that I know are bigger than him. And I'm not saying that as a sexist thing. I'm just saying he was so tiny when I met him. And I know what you're going to say. And it's true to a point. Older guys, sometimes they get hunched over. Sometimes they get a little bit shorter than they used to be, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to tell you something. This guy, Wayne Terwilliger, one of the nicest persons I ever met in my life, was a small, little guy. I mean small and little. I don't know how he played Major League Baseball, and he didn't just play Major League Baseball for one season. He played for over 10 years.
Yep. Yes, he did.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing how gifted and how terrific the skill set of these world-class athletes are. It's just, it boggles the mind. It really does. But that's my story about Wayne Terwilliger.
Okay, and then last but not least on our list, we have Tim Thompson. Tim Thompson was a catcher. He was reported to have been the first major league catcher to wear glasses while catching.
Okay.
He was brought up by the Dodgers in 1954 at the age of 31. And in his very first major league game, he's a catcher, remember. Okay. He had to go into the outfield because a couple of players got hurt and a couple of players got thrown out of the game. So he played his first major league game in the outfield in 1954 for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He had one full season, and that was in 1957, when he and Tommy Lasorda were both traded to the Kansas City Athletics. And that was basically it for him as far as being a Major League Baseball player. Played a number of years in the minor leagues for the Dodgers and other teams, but had that one full season in 1957.
Yeah, I remember seeing him. The only time I remember seeing Tim Thompson was in the Dodger yearbooks. In the back of the Dodger yearbooks, they would have a section called Down on the Farm.
Right.
And there would be stories about Dick Gray and, people like that. And Tim Thompson was listed there, and I used to read about him. And that's he was the first catcher to wear glasses. I thought Clint Courtney was, but I guess Clint Courtney came up in 55.
Yeah.
Maybe a year later or something,
Yep. He came up in, like I said, 54. So.
All right. So those are the 16. Those are the 16 living Brooklyn Dodgers.
Correct.
I remember when I first met you, Robert, on the internet. There were 29 living Brooklyn Dodgers when you and I first met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least.
Maybe more, but I think there were 29, and we were lamenting the fact that there were only 29. Now it's down to 16.
Yep.
Now it's down to 16. I want to mention somebody. It doesn't fit into our 1956, 1957 thing tonight, but I know that a lot of Dodger fans have heard the story and the stories of John Forsythe. John Forsythe was an American actor who was a star in both the big screen and the small screen, both on television and in the movies. John Forsythe had a lovely, lovely head of hair, good-looking guy, and he actually has been said to be the Ebbets Field public address announcer. And I looked it all up, and I did some research. And, in fact, John Forsythe was at, believe it or not, Robert, 18 years old in 1936. He did announce the lineups over the PA system in Ebbets Field. Now, you know what? There was a time when the public address announcer used a megaphone and would just shout out to the stands through the megaphone. I'm not sure when the Brooklyn Dodgers hooked that up electronically so it would come through the speakers. I'm not so sure it was 1936 because I believe if and when they did it, it would have been Larry McPhail, and that would have been 3 years later in 1939. So I'm not sure if Forsythe had a microphone or a megaphone, but he did announce the lineups at Ebbets Field before he went away to college at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill at 18 years of age in 1936 in Brooklyn in Ebbets Field. And I thought that was a gem just to mention on the show, even though it doesn't fit into the 56/57 seasons. We didn't talk too much about our dearly beloved departed third baseman number 2, Ransom Jackson. If I may, I would just have a little, just a brief thought about Ransom Jackson. When Ransom Jackson was traded by the Cubs to the Dodgers, I thought, wow, this is going to be unbelievable. He had like 20-something home runs every year for the Cubs. Imagine him in Ebbets Field. He's going to be like one of our great power hitters. And in fact, when he did first come over, he batted cleanup. It never happened for him. He had a non-baseball injury to his hand, which he described to me off the air when I interviewed him. He didn't want to get into it on the air. He hurt himself in his garage or basement or kitchen. He hurt his hand, and he didn't tell too many people about it. And that was why he really didn't perform well for the Brooklyn Dodgers. I've read things about, well, he hurt his knee, he did this, his knee was hurting, this happened, that happened. That's not true. He told me personally that he injured his hand, and it was his fault, and he was reluctant to disclose it or talk about it, and rightfully so. Maybe he thought he was going to, lose his contract or whatever. But anyway, that was the story on him. His claim to fame, he played in 2 consecutive Sugar Bowl games as a football player. And
right.
You might say, well, how is that such a great feat? Well, he played in 2 consecutive Sugar Bowl games with 2 different colleges.
Yes.
So he did have a claim to fame when it came to that. Handsome Ransom Jackson. Now I understand. I was too young at the time, but now I understand how Dodger fans must have felt when the Dodgers traded for Andy Pafko in 1951, or in late 1950 for the 51 season. Pafko came over. He never really did too much. He might have had one, little bit of an average season, but basically didn't do too much for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I'm sure everyone thought he was going to be gangbusters for the Dodgers. Dodgers didn't give up too much for Andy Pafko, so evidently someone knew it was damaged goods. But anyway, I always put, personally, just me, I always put the Ransom Jackson trade to the Dodgers as equivalent to the Andy Pafko trade to the Brooklyn Dodgers. They both came over as right-handed hitting power hitters, and Brooklyn fans thought, oh, my God, here we go. And nothing really ever caught fire with either one of them.
No. Well,
that's just my feeling, my personal feeling.
Now, with Ransom Jackson, that trade was precipitated by Walter O'Malley. Walter O'Malley, after 1955, told Buzzy Bavasi, trade Robinson.
Yes.
And so they needed a third baseman, and Ransom Jackson was going to be that third baseman. Bavasi did not trade Robinson before the 56 season. He said in interviews that he felt the only way the Dodgers had a chance of winning the pennant in 56 was holding on to Jackie, and he did. Ransom Jackson did play some third base. He did hurt himself, like Peter said, and it was said at the time that he was pushing his automobile, and he put his hand through a headlight. And that's the way it was reported at the time he got hurt in 1956. Yeah. And he basically said that to you, Peter, when he said, he did it himself. So.
Yeah, it was a non-baseball injury,
right.
And he was embarrassed about it. And I don't know if he got a lawyer's advice, but he never really came clean about it
right.
to a lot of people.
Yeah. And then, of course, in 1957, Robinson was traded. He was expected to become the third baseman, and he then suffered a knee injury. And all year long, they were wondering whether they were going to have do surgery on his knee or not. Pee Wee Reese wound up playing a lot of third base because he lost a lot of range at shortstop.
Yeah.
And, I think Randy Jackson, who was expected to hit a lot of home runs, only hit 2 that year, if I remember.
Yeah.
So he then went to the Los Angeles with the Dodgers, wound up being traded to the Cleveland Indians, spent a couple of years with the Cleveland Indians, and wound up his career back where he started with the Chicago Cubs. Ball player.
Go ahead.
Good ball player, good third baseman, played a couple of years as an all-star.
Oh, yeah.
Chicago Cubs. And like Peter said, we were all excited, although I was a little disappointed because they traded Don Hoke and Russ Meyer, who were instrumental in 1955 in helping the Dodgers win the Pennant World Series in order to get Randy Jackson. But, we thought it was an upgrade, and unfortunately it turned out.
Yeah, well, Robert, if you think about it, if we're talking about a legitimate Randy Jackson with no injuries whatsoever, Russ Meyer and Don Hoke would have been a pretty fair trade. If Jackson had come over and hit 25 homers and driven in 75 or 80 runs and hit 275, hell, that would have been unbelievable. We would have loved that. We weren't getting that kind of production from third base.
Well, no. I mean, you had Jackie Robinson there in his last couple of years,
right?
And
Jackie was a different type of player, though. Jackie was an enigma. To people that never saw him play, it's very difficult for me to explain, Jackie Robinson. I've been in situations where younger people would say to me, well, you're Mr. Brooklyn Dodger. Why don't you explain to us about Jackie Robinson? Try to give us a present-day player that was like Jackie Robinson. And the closest I could come to that, the closest I could ever come to that was to try to explain to these younger folks, if I had to pick someone who could dominate a ball game, try to think of Rickey Henderson in his prime. He would dominate the game. He would get on first base on a walk. He would steal second. He would go to third, even if the ball was hit to the left side of the infield. They couldn't get him at third base. He would make it. And then somehow he would score. He would either come in on a ground ball, a bunt, a sacrifice fly, steal home, a short pass ball, a balk, whatever. He dominated the game. And he was extremely exciting to watch him. And that's the best I could explain to a younger fan on what they never saw. I would use Rickey Henderson. Now, maybe you have a better person to use as an example. I don't know. Do you?
Actually, I was thinking Rickey Henderson, but I would say Rickey Henderson. He was an intimidating person, just like Barry Bonds was. Didn't have the power of Barry Bonds, but when Barry Bonds came up, he had an intimidating presence. When Robinson came up, he had that same intimidating presence. Teams didn't want to let him get on base, because once he got on base, then he was like Rickey Henderson. But he had a fierce pride, always protective of the other players on the team. When somebody had to, get into a fight, it was usually Jackie. A famous one was in 1955, Sal Magley knocking Dodgers down left and right, as he did all through his career as a Giant. Jackie gets up, drags a bunt down, first baseline, expecting Magley to come over to pick it up. Magley never picks it up. Robinson winds up running down Davey Williams, who's covering the bag, and Davey Williams was never the same. In fact, that pretty much ruined Davey Williams' career.
Yeah. Davey Williams' career took a southbound freight, just like Ray Fosse after Pete Rose hit him in the All-Star game.
Yep. And then, just to tell a little bit more about Jackie, Alvin Dark, then got up in the Giants half that inning, hit a double, and Jackie said, "I knew he was coming to third." And Alvin Dark, a former football player, as was Jackie, came around second with no chance of getting a triple, and came barreling into Jackie, spikes high. They both went flying. Both got up, both looked at each other and walked in different directions. And, they both respected each other. Jackie said, I respected Dark for doing that, and, there was nothing more to do. And, that's just the kind of player Jackie was. intimidating, exciting, tough. I don't think you could find a tougher ball player than Jackie Robinson.
No, he was exciting, all right. He used to make a young person like myself, when I would watch him, he would actually make you feel anxious. I could feel it in my throat, and you know what I'm saying, in my lungs and in my throat. I would actually get excited and anxious. I guess if we knew back then what we know now about, blood pressure and everything, my blood pressure probably went up, whatever. I used to get actually excited. He was that kind of ball player.
Yep.
Everything he did, especially when he got on base. When he got on base, it was, forget about it. It was like crazy. It was crazy.
Yep.
He was something else.
Yep.
But anyway.
And just staying with Jackie for 1 second, I know
Sure.
you get the same question. Okay, I get it a lot. How come Jackie Robinson batted fourth so much? And he did. He batted in the cleanup position more than any other Dodger during his times.
He did.
The Dodgers. And that's the reasons we just gave were the reasons. I mean, there was no better clutch hitter, not anybody else you'd want to come up, with a chance to knock in a run. And that's the reason why he batted fourth, not because of his power, but because of his intimidating presence.
Yeah, you were always going to get a great at-bat from Jackie Robinson, that's for sure. And his saddest at-bat, as it turns out, we didn't know it at the time, was the final out of the 1956 World Series, where he halfway swung at a pitch down in the dirt that got away from the catcher, and he ran to first base and was thrown out. That was the final out of the 56 World Series. The seventh game, Dodgers lost 9-0, but he was quite a guy in 1,000 different ways, and Ron Rabinovitz isn't here with us tonight to underline that for us, but we all understand it. Before we call it a show, I think that in the past, a year ago, before you were part of this show, I thought that we always shortchanged the Brooklyn Dodgers and talk too much about the Los Angeles Dodgers. Since you're on the show, we've done just the opposite. It is called The Tale of Two Cities, from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. I think before we hang up, we should give 4 or 5 or 6 minutes to the Los Angeles club. I'll start it off. If you don't mind, I'll just say that Kershaw is not going to pitch opening game for the first time in 9 years, and neither is Walker Buehler. And it seems it's going to be Rich. I think it's going to be Rich Hill, but they say it's going to be either Rich Hill or Ryu starting. They say Corey Seager is going to play this weekend against the Los Angeles Angels in the Freeway Series, and that he will be ready, quote unquote, for opening day. Corey Seager, not so sure about that myself. You and I have been watching baseball for a long time, and statistics in spring training are most of the time meaningless, whether they're good or bad. But Austin Barnes has had a very good spring with the Dodgers, a couple of home runs, hitting 300, blocking the ball well. What are your feelings on the upcoming season for the Los Angeles Dodgers, Robert?
Well, I've been watching this off season and this spring in amazement, because I never expected this kind of chaos to be around the Los Angeles Dodgers. They're usually very matter of fact. Everything is boom, boom, boom. And this year, they made trades that led us to believe that they were going to make a couple of big signings. Didn't happen. They still really haven't filled in those spots. The trading of Puig and the trading of Kemp and some of the other trades they made. They brought back Russell Martin. I don't know how much they're going to get out of Russell Martin. You have the Corey Seager injury. Again, how they can say he's going to be ready to go after just playing over the weekend. Generally, as a rule of thumb, they say a major league player needs about 50 at-bats in the spring to,
yes,
be ready to go. I mean, what's he going to get, 8, 10, at tops? And we still haven't seen him throw from the hole in shortstop. The first time that happens, I think everybody's going to be holding their breath. Is he suddenly going to have his arm hanging, or is he going to make the throw and everybody's going to breathe a sigh of relief? I've never seen, and I'm not a big Los Angeles Dodger fan, as you know.
I know.
I'm a baseball fan. I follow the Dodgers. I've never seen a Dodger team in such chaos this year. It's just unbelievable. I've followed Andrew Friedman when he was with the Rays, his first few years with the Dodgers. Everything was done to precision, and that's totally different this year.
Yeah, I think they're in a position where they're probably going to win the Western Division in the National League, just like the Cleveland Indians are in a position to win the Central Division in the American League, and that's only because the other teams are so lacking. I don't think the Dodgers are going to dominate as much as the other teams are going to be lacking. I look for them to, but then again, I looked all winter and I didn't see it, but I still look for them to make a trade or two, and I'm talking about big, at the July 31st deadline, a big trade or two. I don't see them coasting in to another Western Division championship and then losing in October, going home early in October, whether it's from the playoffs or even in the World Series. I don't know. It boggles my mind that they didn't get Kluber. I'm not so much surprised that they didn't get Machado or Harper, but I thought for sure they would get Kluber, and I really also thought they would get JT Realmuto, who is the best catcher in the game right now. They didn't get either one of them, so I don't know. I can't figure it out myself. I think they're going to win the division. I think they're in trouble after that.
Well, don't forget they didn't exactly walk away with the pennant last year.
Nope. I mean, they had to play a play-in game, didn't they? Didn't they have to play a 163rd game?
Yes, they did. Yes, they
did. Yeah.
Both of the last 2 years, they started off horribly and came on like a house of fire. And you have to wonder, is that going to happen again? And are they going to be able to come on like a house of fire in the second half again?
That's why I'm looking for that big trade or two in July. I'm not so sure. I really don't. I don't have that much confidence. I really don't. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know. What's Kershaw going to do? Is Kershaw going to win 10 games? Is Buehler going to win 10 games? Is Ryu going to win 10 games? I mean, I don't see any dominance anywhere.
Peter, is Buehler hurt? Is that why he's not starting?
No, you know what? Buehler's not hurt, but he pitched his first game yesterday. They're bringing him along. They're nursing him along. Now, whether they're not telling us everything, which is a distinct possibility, or whether they're just, babying him. They're also, somebody came out and said they have Urias as scheduled to go between 70 and 100 innings. I mean, that's absolutely absurd. I thought he was going to be I thought Urias was going to be one of the starters in the five-man rotation, and he was going to pitch 160 innings. Evidently, I was wrong about that. I don't know. I really don't know. This is a team, Robert, that went to the World Series twice in the last 2 years. They almost won it 2 years ago. They got drubbed last year. This is a team that brought in an infielder to pitch the bottom of the 16th inning in a tie game during the season. This team is, to say it nicely, just be nice about it, this team is hard to figure out.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I mean, I've never seen a Dodger team so disheveled, you might say, so unorganized.
Yeah.
Maybe they have a plan, but it's sure not apparent to the fan.
It's not apparent at all. It's not apparent at all. And one of the major owners, Walter, his surname is Walter. One of the major owners about a month ago was on the radio, and he almost, what I would call, he mocked Dodger fans for being so apprehensive. You don't understand the game. You don't understand what we're doing. You don't know inside baseball. Blah blah blah. I was appalled at that interview. Absolutely appalled. But we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. I don't see a team beating them in the West. The Rockies could do it. I'm not so sure if they will. Baseball is baseball. We'll see what happens. Anything can happen. And, whatever happens, that's what, we're gonna be watching it. We're going to go, oh, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Because that's because we're baseball fans. Baseball fans always do that. At least I do. I knew he was a bum, or I knew this guy was good, whatever. But we don't know. We don't know. There might be a guy or two on the Dodgers right now. There's a pitcher. I can't pronounce his last name, but there's a right-handed pitcher in camp with the Dodgers right now. His last name is something like Consolo or Consoli, something like that. They say this kid could be really, really something. And then there's another kid, an outfielder, infielder/outfielder named Miller, who they say could really be something. Now, we saw what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago with Chris Taylor, and then we saw what happened last year with Max Muncy. So you never know. There could be a no-name, a quote-unquote no-name, that's waiting in the wings, that's going to surprise all of us and do something great for the 2019 Dodgers. But we'll have to see. We'll have to find out, and it's coming very quickly. Opening day is right around the corner.
Yep. I mean, right now they're looking at a starting rotation of Ryu, Maeda, Hill, Ross Stripling, and Walker Buehler until Kershaw gets back, if he gets back.
If he gets back. Well, we'll see. I'm predicting Rich Hill will pitch the opener. If things go along the way of the Friedman era, Hill, no matter what he does, he'll pitch like 4 innings, 4 1/3 innings or whatever. He could even have a shutout going. He's going to come out, and they're just going to play their game. They're going to do what they always do, and that is give me more gray hair on top of my gray hair. So that's about it. What can I tell you? That's it. Well, we're looking forward to everything. That was a good show. We talked about the 1956, 1957 Dodgers. We talked about Ransom Jackson. We talked about John Forsythe. We talked about some of the trades, the 16 living Brooklyn Dodgers. We ran down some stuff. We played a snippet of a Vin Scully call of a Ebbets Field game in 1957 that my father and I were at. And then we went to L.A. and we talked a little about the 2019 Dodgers. So we did a pretty good show, and I think we should call it a night. What do you think, Robert Cole?
Sounds good to me, Peter. Play ball.
All right. Robert Cole, thank you very much for being my partner tonight. And we'll see you again next week, everybody, and a good night to everyone. Good night.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.